you, saying you were, quote, one of the lucky ones to survive a back alley abortion in the 60s. How dangerous will it be to return to a world without Roe?
Thank you very much, Alicia, for having me this evening. This is a moment that we have to really understand very clearly that 50 years of Roe versus Wade is 50 years of making sure that reproductive freedom and access to reproductive health care, including abortion care, is available for people. And in fact, if Roe versus Wade were not, if they rule against Roe versus Wade, it would be very dangerous, because part of this issue is women having the ability to have safe, legal, accessible abortions. It's no one's decision except the person who's making that decision and whomever she consults with to make the decision. It's not up to any elected officials. It's not up to any Supreme Court justices to decide what you or I will do with our bodies. And so it's very dangerous, and that's why we're working so hard to pass in the Senate now. We passed in the House the Women's Health Protection Act, led by Congresswoman Judy Chu, who saw this coming way back in 2013 and authored this bill, and many of us co-sponsored it, got it out of the House. It would actually codify Roe versus Wade into law and make sure that that's a binding law where women's reproductive freedom would not be eroded anymore.
2013, when people were saying that this was hysterical and hyperbolic to suggest that Roe could ever be under attack, is the thing you don't want to be proven right on. To your point about codifying abortion rights at the federal level, what is your plan to get that through the Senate?
You know, this is a very, it's a plan that involves people throughout our country making sure that they hold their senators accountable. The public, over 60% of the public, believes that women should have the right to make their own decisions about their own reproductive choices. So this is a political struggle. We have to hold members of the Senate accountable, and we have to, in no uncertain terms, make sure that they know that this is a decision that we should make ourselves, not members of the Senate. And in fact, political action means voter registration. It means organizing. We have some wonderful activists and organizations around the country who know how to get this done. And so I'm hoping that members of the Senate understand that their constituents, too, want to have free reproductive freedom, and that they should support the Women's Health Protection Act, because that's extremely important, because we cannot allow the Supreme Court to take away, and I believe this would be one of the first times that they have actually taken away a right that we have that is so important. It's a matter, in many respects, of life and death.
Focusing on the piece of this that you can control legislatively, you are urging the House to repeal the Hyde Amendment. What would that mean for abortion access nationwide?
Sure. We talk about abortion should be equitable, they should be accessible, and they should ensure racial equity and racial justice. You know, Henry Hyde, way back, who was a member of Congress in the 70s, decided that he wanted to make sure that abortion rights did not exist for anyone, but knowing that he could not address Roe versus Wade at that point, decided to institute the Hyde Amendment, which would deny low-income women, who are primarily women of color, the same access to abortion care that everyone who has money or insurance would have. And so the Hyde Amendment, which we're trying to repeal, would make sure that everyone, regardless of their background, regardless of their zip code or their income, have equal access to the full range of reproductive choices, including abortion care.
You know, you talked a little bit about the mobilizing force around abortion care and how Democrats will need to sort of make that front and center. It also strikes me that this is part of a broader picture, right? It's about access to contraception. It's about quality sex education in this country. It's about the internal inconsistency of arguing that you have to carry a pregnancy to term, but then not wanting to live in a country where you guarantee paid family leave. It would seem to me that a lot of these domestic issues now become front and center in 2022, way beyond abortion itself.
Lacey, they all intersect with each other. For years, I've been trying to get comprehensive sex education, my legislation passed, so that young people will have the opportunity to learn about sex ed and to be able to prevent the transmission of sexually transmitted infections, diseases, and also know how to prevent early and unintended pregnancy. So we have to do that. Abstinence only just doesn't work. Secondly, there are those who really, and you should hear some of the debate about birth control. There's some who in Congress who don't believe that women should have access to birth control. They don't want women to have access to abortions. They don't want women to have access, and young people to sex education. What in the world do they want? And so this is a larger attack and an assault, I believe, on our democracy, because these are issues that are fundamental to how we live our lives and how we move forward in the type and create the type of life that we want to create with our families. And so these fundamental rights are being attacked, and you're right, not just abortion rights. These are rights that are being attacked in terms of racial justice, in terms of income inequality, equity, criminal justice, you name it, and they're trying to roll the clock back to the days that some of us remember, which, I even hate to think about, the days of Jim Crow. They're trying to take away our voting rights. They're trying to take away each and every right that we have fought so hard over the years. African Americans 401 years ago were brought here enslaved. We've been fighting ever since to be free and to be part of this wonderful society in terms of equal opportunity and racial equity, and we have a long way to go. We've come a long way to go, but they're trying to take us back, and all of these issues intersect with each other, and I hope that this is a wake-up call, especially for young people who have not lived in a world where abortion rights were taken away.
Congresswoman Lee, as always, thank you so much.